Hello, welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health here on YouTube. I am Todd Rennebaum, your host, suicide attempt survivor, and substance abuser, and recovering substance abuser. I'm no longer abusing. Anyway, this week I have two wonderful guests. One is Bryan Rice, the other is Kayseas, and they work at the incredible school, Cornwall Alternative School in Regina, Saskatchewan. I have the immense pleasure, and I'm so grateful that I had that immense pleasure, still have it, to be a mentor for a few weeks there. And it's a wonderful, wonderful school. This is grade 7s to grade 10. They're trying to get grades 11 and 12 there. So it's not really a public school. It's not really a private school. It's a school for children in those grades that are having a lot of trouble learning and staying in normal schools, whether it's mental health reasons, troubles at home, etc., etc. And so Bryan, he is the principal and CEO there, and Jay, he is a counselor there, and they're constantly needing money because just it's a non-for-profit charitable school. So yeah, it's a wonderful school. Anyway, they're going to talk all about it here. So without further ado, I give you Jay and Bryan.
Historically, the school started, I believe, by a few social workers. We're 51 years in now. And what they had noticed, that there was a bunch of students in Regina, student age children that were in Regina that weren't in school. They weren't attending classes. So they created a kind of a tutoring house. And then through the tutoring house that was originally on Cornwall Street, they were able to kind of meet those needs and then build it and then eventually become a school that would work with at-risk youth or students that didn't fit into the mainstream system for one reason or another. Historically, with the students that were at Cornwall until now, there's always been a big variety. And I think that Cornwall has evolved throughout its history to meet the needs of a lot of different students in a lot of different ways. Again, society changes and there's trends and different things like that. And if you look at our student population that I've had for 3 years here, there's a major diversity for why a student attends here and why they may have had some challenges in the other school. For barrier removal, we have a food program for breakfast and lunch. We also have transportation, and we also have a special team full of counselors and outreach. And I'll kind of let Jay take it from here on that aspect of it.
Hey, yeah. So I am one of the two counselors here at Cornwall School. I started about 4 years ago, and part of my role is just to offer a safe space for children. You know, the best thing I can do is just kind of co-regulate our youth as they kind of go through the wonders of life and whatnot. So it's been a good place. I love it here. You know, I wouldn't change it for the world. And it's just, here for the students, here for the kids, trying to make some good positive changes.
Nice. I noticed there's not a large school population there, but I'd say I go to a normal high school in Regina. There's maybe one counselor for maybe 1,000 students. Is that about?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it depends on the school. There's a few counselors and things like that, and some other intertwined supports, but there's not ones that directly work inside like ours do. Ours build a relationship right from, I guess, that intake process to be that support and just about that classroom ratio. We try to keep that ratio of 12 students to one teacher because we feel like all those different connections that the student may have with a lot of mentoring adults in the building is a big help.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know, you're roughly 80 students?
We're right now in our numbers, we're about 47. 42 is roughly the numbers that we kind of target based on what we're supposed to with the ministry. And then depending on circumstances, we kind of shift from there.
Right. And then the thing I love is, so you have a very small population, 47, but then you have two full-time counselors and what's Rob's title again?
Rob's an outreach worker, so he'll work with the students that graduate from our program. So if there's a student that's doing really came here grade 7, whether it be academic or just history of verbal abuses or whatever. So yeah, once they graduate from our program, we'll help them transition to the new school. Whether so we'll take them for show them the school, give them a tour of the school, introduce them to if they're indigenous advocate or whoever they may be with, right? So that's his role, and he'll follow them for a year, maybe two. He also bring them back for lunches. A lot of the old students come back for lunches. We have an awesome cook, so always come back for some food.
Nice. So yeah, I guess that's one of your issues with the school. It's grade 7 to grade 10, and then grade 11 and 12 they kind of get put back into the system that they were not really accustomed to, or didn't really work for them from grade 7 to grade 10. So I guess that's a fairly big transition, and you guys are trying to go to grade 11, grade 12, but it's just a funding issue.
Yeah, for sure. On that side, what we're trying to do is we are trying to kind of change our operations to a degree. What we generally see is we've got about a third of our students come in and they do really well. They get stabilized and they work through different barriers and they kind of figure out what their why is in education and maybe their purpose, and then they can transition back. We have some students that come here and they do amazing here, but we know that when they go back, they're not ready for those, larger classrooms and not really going to have that same family tight knit support that they have experienced here. And then it's helped them develop success. And then we've got a third of students that previously would probably be, a full on dropout, zero success, and they're coming along a little bit slower. And although they may not be fully succeeding here, they're still doing far better here than they had historically. And so for those students that are doing well here, but we know that it's not going to be a great fit to send back, or for the students that are, they're coming along a little slower, we would like to be able to have those spots so that they can either build up on their success or continue to have success.
Right. Nice. Jay, if you ever need to go, like if a student needs you or anything, feel free to help them out.
Okay.
Just throwing that out there. But is there someone there now?
No, it's not like students walking by, so it's all good. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You got to keep an eye on who's going out the door and walking in the halls.
Yeah.
Well, I've only spent a few afternoons there, but I love the vibe of just, when a kid is in the middle of class, they're not, exactly participating with the other students. The teacher is just gently approaches them and is like, "Hey, what do you need right now?" And some of them want to go talk to Jay or talk to Rob or just need to go to the gym to dribble basketball for 20 minutes. And it's just, okay, you go do what you need to do, because that's what the school's all about. It's amazing.
That was one of the first things that I noticed too when I started here was how just different it was. Because when I was going to school, I was never allowed to go say if I need to go to the gym, go and relax, go and collect my thoughts, right? I would honestly get sent to the hall. Go sit in the corner or go outside the classroom, go sit there. And what I noticed about, grade 10, Gil, he's a great teacher, and Joey's another great teacher, was when they needed breaks, their students were allowed just to go out. And, like a lot of them went to shoot hoops my first few years, and that was just awesome to see, because when we tried to, make them sit in class and you got to concentrate, you got to do this, and this, and this, and this, and everything is piling onto them, because all of us, just like everybody else, every one of us does our best. You, Bryan, myself, Cheryl, all of us, right? We're doing the same with our kids. And our kids are going through so much more stressors at home, and there's just so much more difficulties than the average person, right? So this is also some of the reasons they might come to our school. This manifests in other different ways, right? So that's what I noticed at school right away too, was how, I don't want to say lenient, but how different and better it was in the regular school system than just, because kids with ADHD are not meant to sit in one classroom, sit down all day. Right? It's hard for any of us to sit down in one classroom all day, right? Sit at our desk and do work and concentrate and expect to work the whole way through, right? And it's just kind of unfair, realistic expectation sometimes. And Yeah, they're just great teachers, great staff. It was just, yeah, one of the first things I noticed too.
And was that kind of the mentality right from the start of the school?
Yeah, from my very first day, it was just seeing how different, like especially when I went to school, because I went to Bird Fox Composite High, and there was an alternative class which I was in from grade 9 to grade 12. So I graduated alternative class, and I was like, man, like I wish I had this kind of type of school when I was here. You know, everyone's made to fit in. We're not meant to be outsiders, you know, and we all talk to the students. I love that slow numbers because I can talk to every student directly. I know their name. They know a little bit about me, right? And yeah, I can't force the kids come sit down and talk with me if they're going through stuff. So the best thing to do is just kind of get to know them, joke around with them, and then eventually become comfortable enough. Then to start opening up, and that's where the healing or just the letting go of the stresses, talking things out, kind of, yeah, getting the energy out. So,
Mm-hmm. And Bryan, what made you? Had you heard of the school before you applied to work there?
Well, so I knew about it when I was in university, yeah, a little bit, and I didn't know much about it though because again, like it was still pretty quiet and things like that. But we did kind of work on it a little bit there, and then fast forward to my career with Regina Public. I was with Regina Public for 10 years, and inside those 10 years, I worked at Scott Collegiate, and through Scott Collegiate. We had a lot of students that would come over from Cornwall after their transition, or maybe like whether it was grade 10 or grade 9 or whatever. And so when a lot of the kids would come there, and I got to know them, so I got to know a little bit more who they were, and I had moved out of town just to kind of start my admin career and get a new experience. And when I was getting ready to move back, there was a former colleague of mine that he knew I was admin. They knew they were looking for admin, and after working alongside him at Scott Collegiate, he was like, "Hey, he's like, I think that you're a good fit for this. Like, you should really, really consider this." And I was kind of in a place where, like, I've always been really passionate about working with at-risk youth and trying to make sure that I can create some change and definitely provide an opportunity for people to see themselves in having a successful future, even if at the current status they don't. And so by me being able to come in and coming into a staff that was collectively wanting the best for those students and wanting to do everything that they can and pull out all the stops to try to change a trajectory for a youth, I was excited right away. And when I walked through the doors, I started to see how everything operated, and I got to have lots of great, meaningful conversations with the staff and figure out like how much care and thought goes into try to make these interventions. Then I knew I was kind of at home and wanted to, I just wanted to keep going with it. And again, on the business side, my job, I'm principal. I do our social media. I do a billion different other side jobs with it. But my biggest job and my biggest challenge over the first 3 years is making sure that we're financially viable and we get the things that we need to be able to support our students. And so a lot of people think, it must be stressful working with at-risk youth and all that kind of thing. And I personally, I don't think it is. I think that that's the part of the job that I enjoy and I appreciate and I love. And I'd actually, if anything, it's the least stressful part of the job for me. The part that for me is just making sure that, hey, we've got the money flow coming in so we can provide these opportunities. We can provide the food program. We can provide the counselors and the supports and the staff so that we can give all of our students who would most likely be a dropout, an opportunity to become a contributing and successful adult.
Jay, you obviously wanted to work with at-risk people because you're a counselor.
yeah.
Did you have some good influences, or like what kind of got you into that trajectory of social work?
Into social work,
or counseling, or whatever you're.
Yeah, that kind of goes back. I remember a story when I was in grade 8 or grade 9. We got asked one question, and the teacher asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I remember my answer was happy, right? That was the wrong answer for him, right? But I always wanted to be happy. So I always wondered why that. I always wanted to be happy. There was a little, so going back, there was a little part of me that was always kind of sad or depressed or some emotions, right? So, yeah, it was actually one teacher that changed my whole life. And I forget his name. It was a substitute teacher. And he came to my class and he gave me back my writing assignment, and he patted me and said, "Hey, this is university writing." Or he said, "I wish I had you years earlier. This is university writing." Put it on me. He's like, "Oh," and I was like, "Oh, wow, this is the first time anybody ever said anything positive, right, about my work, about me." And then that gave me, I always remember that little thing, and I always swear it planted a little seed. Because before that, I didn't think a whole lot about myself, low self-esteem, low everything, right? So, um, I graduated school. I started working. I used to work in steel factories until I was 30. And then I just kept on hurting my back. And I asked the doctor, what can you do? And he says, quit your job. And I was like, oh, I just can't quit my job. It's not that easy. I got a way of living already. I got this, and that. And eventually I hurt my back so bad. And I was like, yeah, I got to change something. And then I always remember that one teacher is like, hey, this is university writing. So I applied as a mature student to university at the young age of 30. And yeah, I got in, and guess what my first mark was, my very first exam?
F.
Oh, it was
Oh.
close too. I got a 64. I was so proud of it though. Because I was like, imagine what I could do if I studied, if I applied myself and everything, right? And, and those didn't happen till the very last year. But in those, my very first year, I've been through a breakup of 10 years. I lost my best friend and I lost my pet, all within 4 months of each other. So it was pretty crazy, pretty sad time for me. So I went to counseling when I was in First Nations University, awesome counselor, Marlene, and totally helped me change the trajectory in my life. And it was her that made me want to become a counselor. I was like, man, she helped me so much. I wish I can help others the way she helps others, right? So in my mind, it was like, when I grow up now, I want to be like Marlene. And I was like, I can't be like Marlene because I'm a guy. I got my own qualities, my own things. So I just tried to hone down on those. And yeah, after school, I graduated, went to Northern BC. I was working as a child and youth mental health. So I was the one going into schools for an hour a week. I noticed that wasn't enough time spent with the children. Most of the stress in their life happens at home. And I was like, well, maybe if I'm in their life a little bit more, I could help a little bit more. So I transitioned to the school. And yeah, it's been here for 4 years now.
Nice. And what kind of success stories are you guys seeing since you've been there? Like with students, I mean, like, are they like? I understand not everyone's gonna become a doctor or whatever, but what are some of the happier moments I guess you've seen since being there?
For me, I think it's like, again, we've got quite a few stories. We've got some students that have shown up with pretty much no hope, no purpose, and then all of a sudden one day you see that click, and it's like, I had some mentorship early in my men career, and I was told that sometimes people may need something shared with them 20 to 30 times in 20 to 30 different ways before it finally clicks. And when you get to see that click, when a student goes from kind of being supported and dragged along, and then kind of like that, I guess that extrinsic motivation of, the different reward programs we provide and those things, then all of a sudden they start to decide for themselves that, hey, this is a path I want to do. And it's that intrinsic shift that is the one for me. We've had one student in particular that, he came in having no real clue of any hope, and there was a lot of overwhelming fear and just anxiety based on what the future held. And that student ended up becoming a community leader, has been offered lots of different national places as far as like being an advisor. He's doing amazing things for the community, and he's going to be successful. And for us, if we didn't exist, then I mean that story isn't there, right? Like we were able to kind of take that trajectory and then completely turn it around, and then not only have somebody kind of start to be okay in school, but start to really start to put a stamp on what their life could look like.
Well, I noticed as soon as I walked in, like I didn't do like a full 1 hour talk or anything, but I just was introduced to a lot of the classes and stuff. And I always introduce myself as a suicide attempt survivor. I'm in recovery of addiction and recently diagnosed with ADHD. Especially when I'm talking to kids, that's how I introduce myself. And the amount of kids that like lifted their heads off the desk or their eyes lit up, and it was just like, they felt like, I don't know, they just related and they felt seen and they felt like, oh, this guy's kind of like me or like my parent or whatever. And it's amazing when you just validate a kid, just how much that can affect their trajectory going through the rest of their school system. So, yeah, it's amazing. Speaking of the students, and addiction, I know, I mean, pretty much everywhere in North America right now, there's, the opioid crisis and a lot of addiction and record-breaking overdoses and suicides. How many of these kids are either have addiction issues or have parents with addiction issues? I mean, not specific numbers, but
there's definitely an ebb and a flow. Like I would say again, like when we were talking about just everybody's very complex and everybody's very diverse. And I think that there's been kind of a shift in higher trajectories and lower trajectories. I would say it's always going to be something that's there, right? Like we're a school for at-risk youth, so it's always something that's going to be a part of our program. And the nice thing is we have the ability to work with those as well as the other agencies to provide that support and make sure that this is a safe meeting spot, that we have an addictions counselor that comes in once a week, and so we make sure that we're set up for those, right? As far as like just the ratios go, like it probably could be anywhere from maybe a tenth at sometimes, or just a handful at sometimes, all the way down to, or to like a kind of like a higher percentage of 30, just depending, right? Like we do have a lot of changeover and shift, and so it just depends on what's the need is at that moment in inside of our community.
You did mention when I was there, I don't know if you don't want this in, I can cut out, but that a lot of the students have actually lost parents to addiction. Like actually their parents like lost their lives. And yeah, if I recall, you were thinking it was around 25 to 30% of the students.
Yeah.
Incredible.
That's a thing right now. Like it's a pretty, like this is a pretty high, it's a pretty high number in general for that currently, but I think that's also a reflection on just kind of the community in general, whether this year alone I've known 3 people that have taken their own lives, and it just seems like that those kind of numbers and that kind of hopelessness a little bit has been leading to that, and just on how things have been going, right? So, but yeah, definitely it's kind of an epidemic in our community, and we try to do the best that we can to kind of support that. And I mean that's a lot of what Jay and Cheryl and Rob do, and then with our teaching staff trying to kind of work off of that. But yeah, definitely it's a lot higher number than one would expect or want to see, that's for sure.
Jay, how do you manage knowing what the kids are going through and knowing sometimes they go home and everything that you've just talked with them that day is kind of like thrown out the window, or something new at home happens and then it's like,
yeah, it's very hard not to take things home, right? So
yeah,
I just have my own practice of self-care. Like I come here and smudge in the morning. I smudge various times throughout the day just to help clear my aura, cleanse myself. I go to counseling myself once a week. That really helps kind of clear and shift my whole mental state. And yeah, working with the kids, it's like I remember when I went for my job interview, one of the first things they said, I can't perform miracles. If I could, I'd be a rich man, right? So I always remember that I can't perform miracles. All I can do is my best, right? Sometimes my best is just to co-regulate them, sit with their feelings, validate their feelings sometimes. And honestly, like I can make their problems go away at home. I know that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
just by knowing that is just it makes it easier for my mind, right? So, but I will pray for them for the right things to happen in their life, no matter what. Like I'm a spiritual guy, I believe in prayer, so I will say some prayers for them when I go to ceremony. If I go sweat somewhere, I always remember my youth, right? And yeah, I always say some prayers for them, the right things to happen in their home, some good things to happen, and so yeah. But
What
it is
about
very difficult not to take things home, especially after some hard days. It's like, oh, I wish I could just do something for this youth. I wish I could just take all their pain, and right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Working in addictions, yeah, it was very similar. And I just remember thinking, as long as I'm doing the best I can while I'm there that day, that's all I can do. And whatever happens is out of my hands beyond that. So
Mm.
that's good that you have those practices. What about the teachers? Do they see counselors too, or therapists?
I think in general, everybody kind of to a degree has their own system,
Right.
and you again, it's important to make sure that you're looking after yourself. Historically,
Yeah.
prior to myself being in education, I was in EMS. So again, I do have PTSD from being in EMS, and it is a thing that I carry. So what everybody has to kind of try to find that way to work through stress that works personally, right? It's the same thing as what I talk to the students about is when we try to figure out a plan to kind of help support a student in resolving a barrier, whether that barrier is attendance or behavior or whatever it is, we always need to have that student input, because if myself or other staff project something on, that student isn't going to own it because it isn't their voice, right? So having that independent voice of knowing what the needs are, I think is important for all staff to to kind of to follow through with that, right? Because otherwise, yeah, it can get heavy and it can get stressful. And if you're, just like our students in the classroom, if you as an individual are redlining all the time, you're not necessarily going to have the patience to work through. Work through for them if you're not able to yourself, right? And so that it's key to be able to find that space for yourself to be successful in looking after your own mental health.
Yeah, and I noticed with the staff, it's not like no one's there for the paycheck. Like everybody loves being there, and this is soul filling for them, so they're very passionate about it. So, yeah, when they do have a bad or even a tragic day or something, it's good that they're all practicing something to deal with that. Because the last thing you want is someone who's very passionate and good with the kids to burn out quick, and then then you're helping nobody. Then. Are you finding there's a lot of stigma with your students in the school? Because some people you think right away it's like an inner city school, or like they're bad kids. They're they're not struggling kids. They're bad kids. They're criminals and things like that. Are you finding there's that kind of stigma?
Um, like I would say that I have to again, we were very quiet for a very long time as an organization. And that was due to the stigma. There wasn't a lot shared about who we are, what we provide. So we've started doing a lot more of that in the last 3 years. And in doing so, what I found is a lot of people don't even know we exist. And so then when they find out we exist, then they kind of look at us like, maybe we're a program that is for kids that are, that bad idea. And then I kind of I share that idea about what we actually are and what we provide. And then when we are able to be in an opportunity where we can provide a visit or have somebody to come check out the place and stuff, they get to see really that everybody here is just students that have had some unfortunate circumstances, and they're trying their best to get back on track. It definitely with mental health being talked about more and different things like that, it has helped us remove that stigma to a degree, because it's again, it still has a long way to go, but the idea that people can share who they are and what their experiences are, and maybe the unkind things that have happened in life, or the different, maybe not great trajectories, that has helped us as well, because then it's more society based, that it's not just you're here because you're a horrible kid or you've done something bad, right? Like it's that you're just a kid and you're overcoming some things. So
mm-hmm. or that or that it's a really rough school. It's you go in there and there's going to be knife fights and stuff, and it's like the most chill school I have ever been in. And your school population, it's very high in Indigenous kids, and I love that you throw in lots of their culture in there in the teaching, and on the a lot of the artwork on the walls, and I'm assuming that must be very important for a student that's already struggling to then feel recognized.
Yeah, it's very important just to have part of their identity and know who they are. And some of our students don't know if they're Cree or Soto, and you can kind of tell by their last names or reserves. So I tell them, he's like, hey, this you're Cree or you're Soto. Like, well, how do you know? I was like, well, you're from this reserve. Your last name is Soto. There's a little things, and it's very important to just for our students to know who they are, especially seeing the artwork, all the different Indigenous activities we do, and the teachers do a really, really, really great job of incorporating that stuff into the classroom. So it's just I think it's unconsciously meeting one of their needs of being seen, being attached to to a sense of community, right? So it's just awesome.
Yeah. It's like what's that? Gabor Mate says the opposite of addiction is connection, and and not just connection with other people, but connection with your own, identity and your own past, I guess, where you're from, who you are exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And I know I actually taken Gabor Mate's compassion inquiry course. So a lot of the stuff I say in my counseling, I kind of echo off him, and also just the wise words of the elders that I've heard. And it was crazy. So years and years ago, I was at a rain or Sundance or Big Lodge, and one of the elders was saying, "Is like you got to watch your mind. Your mind will get you sick." And I always remember that. And then, future 10 years later, university talking about Gabor Mate and some of the stuff he says, and how our minds will make us sick. So what he means by that is our brains don't know what's reality and what's not, right? So if I was thinking I'm going through this whole stressful situation, my brain is going to release all the chemicals into my body. It's going to stir up my blood pressure. I'm going to get into this little mode where my heart's pumping, right? And that's all from one thought. It's not true. I could do the same thing. I could say that, oh, I'm going to have a great, great day. And I think of all the good stuff that happened in my life, the potentials of the day, and my body would feel great, right? If I woke up so story time. Okay.
Sure.
All right. So So back when I was in my major depression, going through counseling, before I went to counseling, I was super, super depressed. I remember living in a basement in my parents' house, actually, and it was one of those kids who was waking up and just damning the whole day before it started. I remember waking up and looking outside the window. I was like, "Oh, great! It's raining outside. Of course, it's raining. Gray skies, no sunshine, no whatever." So I was like, "Oh, whatever." That was my whole mentality for the whole time I was depressed, right? And so morning happened. I go outside. This was when I was smoking. So I went outside, had a cigarette, and had my morning coffee. And I remember thinking, it's like, okay, I got to change something. I got to change something. My whole mentality. I got to look for something. So I remember I kind of said a prayer, like, I'm going to look for something that's going to make me laugh. I'm going to look for something that's going to make me smile today, right? And everything was gray. It was storming outside. And then I remember looking up. It's like, I'm going to look for something I looked up in the sky, and after maybe 10 seconds of just looking at the sky, there was a break in the sky, right? And it showed a sunbeam right across the street where I was sitting. And I looked up and I followed the sunbeam, and it led right to a squirrel. And the squirrel was on a tree. It was running up, doing somersaults. Eh? I was like, "What? I've never seen that before." Right? So that made me smile. It was like, man, this. If I look for stuff, like if I look for something, if I look for the good in life, I'll see it. If I look for the bad in life, I'm always going to see that, right? So one of the activities I do with my students is, if you guys want to do this part two, you guys can look around your room right now, look for everything in the room that's red, right? All right, Todd, look for everything that's red. Right?
Dark in
Count
here.
everything. I always tell my students, if you guys get this right, I'll give you $10. Right? So if you guys get everything right, all right, give yourself another few seconds, look around. Now close your eyes, right? Close your eyes and tell me everything in the room that's blue. Right? So open your eyes, look around, you guys will notice how much things are blue in the room, right? If you guys are, yeah. So that mentality is like what we focus on is what we see, right? If we're focusing only on the bad, we're missing so much good that's happening out there. And again, it's easy for me to say, you guys gotta look for the good in life, because when there's so much bad happening in your life, so it's a whole process, right? And part of the counseling is feeling your feelings, because a lot of us just get disconnected from feeling our bodies. So much pain there. Our body holds so much pain, so much everything, right? So a lot of what Gabor Mate says is, hey, we can't talk things out, right? If we could, one night with our buddies talking about everything, oh, we'd be so much better, right? But so my counselor really made it really good. She's like, we can't heal from here. It's like, from this space here, this is where we have to heal from, right? We have to
For the audio listeners, he was pointing at his head.
Yeah, I'm making sorry about that. I see myself on camera here, and we can't heal ourselves from the head. Healing really happens inside our body, with the heart being connected, being vulnerable, right? Vulnerability is one of the greatest strengths we can have, and it's so damn scary, though, right? Because vulnerability is old feelings, everything old, right? That's followed us from our time when we're young children. So, um, yeah, my practice is always not like, when a child or a youth comes sees me, they're upset, I'll say, okay, what happened? I won't say what happened. I'll say, well, how do you feel, right? Feelings are happy, angry, sad, mad, right? And okay is not a feeling, right? What is okay feeling? No, it's not a feeling, right? So I always try to work with that. And some people aren't there yet. So I don't force them to go into their body, because it could just backfire.
Yeah, I like that he said okay isn't a feeling. I had a counselor that used to say, fries are okay. Or no, it was good. How do you feel? Good. No, fries are good. How are you feeling? Anyway.
And just to jump off what you're saying there, it's funny, because that's the thing that I often talk to with students. Like, we come up with some plans on how we're gonna remove those barriers sometimes, and one of the things that we always say is, like, I'm going to be good in my classroom. Well, let's talk about what good looks like, right? Like, I'm going to, all those different kinds of things. So, yeah.
Yeah, just getting just getting anybody to sit with their feelings is super, even an adult, right? We're so conditioned from our very young selves, especially men. Hey, you're not supposed to cry. Real men don't cry, right? And when I was going to ceremony, my late grandfather would say, real men cry. You guys are supposed to cry. He says, as a matter of fact, when you cry, you're supposed to look up, right? So that's what I teach myself. Well, that's what I had to relearn myself and uncondition and go through stuff like that. And that's what I tell my son now. And he's so connected. So it's so awesome to see, right? How I change myself could affect him, right? And that's what, yeah, just working through that intergenerational trauma, because, like, I noticed from my dad, he was super disconnected from his feelings. And I thought that was normal, right? So, hey, I don't got to talk about my feelings. I'll stuff everything down. And just like Gabor Mate says, when you stuff things down, it's going to cause depressing, right? So it's all these emotions. I always tell my students, if you're going to do that, it might show up and you might just, it's going to come out somehow. It could come out in anger, could come out in tears, frustration, many different
Violence.
manifestations. Yeah, violence is a big one, right? And it's just not having that outlet where all the energy is stored in their body somewhere. And it's, yeah, it has to come out. If it doesn't come out the way you want, it's going to come out the way it wants in any way possible. So,
I even learned that as an adult going through addiction treatment. It was like, I know what feelings are. Why do I have to learn how to feel? And then you really get into it. It's like, I don't even know how to feel happy. Like I wasn't even giving myself permission to feel happy. But so now I don't know, maybe this is a boring thing, but it's also fascinating, is the budget wise, how does the school get funding? Because it must be like this constant looming thing is, are we going to have enough money to keep going?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a challenge. So the majority of our funding comes from the Ministry of Education. And then we do a whole lot of grant writing. We always are hopeful for community donations. We try to do a whole bunch of fundraisers and things like that. But at the end of the day, a lot of what we do is kind of outside of what's funded in education. And so what we really need to do is we need to make sure that we're financially sustainable so that we can have all these great people working with these kids so we can kind of change those lives around. And it's tricky too, right? Because like a few years ago, a high school dropout, I believe, was $125,000 as a negative on the economy. Whether it was you enter into the justice system, whether you enter into health or social services, all those different things. Whereas if you are a high school graduate and you're on that like contributing an adult path, then you're adding a positive to the economy, right? And so it's challenging because a lot of the things that we do still fall outside of that, and we have to fundraise and we have to try to get donors and we have to try to get as many supports as we can. And I mean, for us being invisible for almost 48 years of our existence and really only being around like visibly in the last 3 years, we're kind of starting from square one and letting everybody know who we are. But that all the money and donations that we receive, whether they're to go towards the food program or to go towards kids' activities or to go towards like salaries, right? Infrastructure funding, things like that. Where we don't just have it based on our funding model. We have to try to find it in a lot of different sources. So anybody that comes out of the woodwork always with money or a different plan or opportunities, that's huge for us.
So you not only take like financial donations, you would take in kind, whether it's food or even hardware supplies to keep the school looking good and functioning. And
anything. Well, 100%. Like it just as far as like if a business wanted to donate, hey, we're gonna paint the school for you, right? Like we just had a boiler go this year. We run on a 2-boiler system. We currently have one operating only. It's brand new. The older boiler that was working at 75%, which made some pretty cold days in December and January, because it was only working at 75%. It died 2 days after the new one. So if we didn't have the funding for that, we were lucky that was provided for us by a mixture of Farm Credit Canada and the Canadian Tilling Foundation and a few other donors. If we didn't have that, then I mean we're without our physical building, right? We've had things like I mean when you walk around, you've seen all the windows. They're pretty wild. Like right now, going into this summer, we have to try to find a system because again, unfortunately, the way the climate is right now, a lot of windows get smashed and things like that, and so we've had to put in a lot of money for those and put in work. We even had a couple classrooms boarded up by 2x4s and plywood at some points. And we want our students to feel cared about, because if they have an environment where there's care and that and everything looks good, then they get to feel good, right, in their environment, and it feels safe, right? And so any time that we can receive donations or in kind anything, it's massive for us. It really changes the trajectory for our students, and it gives us a good beacon of support as well, because it reminds us that the community cares about what the work that we're doing.
Well, again, it's connection. So why not? It's not just connection one-on-one with other people. It's also connection with your community as a whole. And so, yeah, why not reach out and connect with your city or that the kids are growing up in and from. So, yeah, it's nice to not keep it a secret or anymore. So, yeah, I agree. That's very important.
The reason that Cornwall has always been around is because we've evolved in our programming, and we have to make sure that as an organization we can continue to evolve in all the different ways to make sure that we're here. Because if we're not here, that's approximately 80 students a year. That's kind of roughly who comes in through the doors. Depending on the transitions, if we need to make sure that we are sustainable. So, because otherwise that's approximately 50 to 80 kids a year that aren't going to graduate, and they're going to have some life struggles. And if that happens, then, I mean, at the end of the day, that's going into a far more expensive process, right? So,
and I suppose, I mean, big picture, big dream, but also, a tangible dream is to be able to offer grade 11 and 12 as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, we want to get those graduates, and we want to see those kids through, and we've got some developments already with potential post Cornwall grad scholarship programs. So we're just waiting on the go ahead on that stuff, because that would be meaningful. And it, again, if we can get some of our students being community leaders and things like that, it's gonna go a long way, because perspective means a ton. And representation means a ton, and if we can get community leaders, it will definitely kind of makes for a more inclusive community, makes for a better society. It gives an opportunity for great leadership with a different lens.
Mm-hmm. And it would help with the stigma too, because I mean, the more isolating you are, then the more it seems like there's a stigma. Because if you're just out and saying, hey, this is who we are, these are our troubles, this is what our kids need, it just normalizes that whole conversation, which then ends the stigma. And I'm a big advocate for ending stigma. The way to end a stigma is for those that are being stigmatized to be more out front and open and talk. Otherwise, no one's going to learn on their own. People need to be informed. So, I think you're on the right track there. Be sure to subscribe and to like this video. You can listen on Apple Podcast and Spotify. This is Todd Rennebaum saying, make your beds and take your meds. Keep watching for more interviews with incredible people telling their stories of resilience and adversity with mental health and mental illness.